Thank you to Sam for that introduction, and to everyone at Fashion Projects, both for inviting me to do this and for making my visit to Miami such a good time. And thank you, for those. Can't speak. Sorry, can't even blame jet lag anymore, can I? Thank you for coming, and thank you especially to those of you who. Is that better? There you go. Okay. Right, there we go. And thank you to those of you, who were here last time and suckers for punishment or just lovers of men's underwear, obviously. So tonight the talk is Jocks in Jocks, sportsman and underwear advertising. And I'd like to start with this. Can you see the slides all right? Is that kind of, I know it's a bit bright here, but... So in February 2012, the British footballer David Beckham launched a range of underwear. That's better, isn't it? That were sold exclusively through the UK, through the high street retailer H&M, and met with a storm of press and fashion industry commentary. The marketing campaign featured images of Beckham taken by fashion photographer Alistair McClellan in a variety of garments that he'd designed for the bodywear range. And I think it's interesting that it was called a bodywear range rather than an underwear range. And the images were used both in the press and window displays. This is the flagship store at Oxford Circus on the left with the advertising. And here, this is in the Regent Street store. And I'll come back and mention this statue a bit later. When this launched, I was quite excited about this, partly because I was writing about men's underwear, but also this thought that the sportsman acted as a way of looking at underwear and advertising underwear, and allowed a certain gaze at the semi-clothed male body. But what's interesting is that while there was a sort of storm around Beckham launching this underwear campaign, both with his name on it and his advertising in it, he's by no means the first sportsman, or athlete, maybe is a better word to use here, to appear in underwear advertisements, or indeed to have his own underwear brand. And, that's what I want to talk about today, is the way that sportsmen have been used to advertise and promote underwear through the 20th century. Babe Ruth, interestingly, nearly 20 years earlier than David Beckham, had his own underwear brand. And I will come back to that in a moment. So packaging, labels, I'll come and say a bit more about that in a moment. But I want to sort of say a little bit more broadly about kind of the sportsman and sporting imagery in underwear advertising. So in the 1920s, sporting stars began to endorse branded men's underwear by appearing in advertisements. And this use of named sportsmen, or jocks, to refer to the title, is kind of, fills a very particular place. So very early men's underwear advertising, so here from 1907, 1910, as I said at the last talk, for those of you here, a lot of men's underwear advertising focused on the ideas of comfort and health, and particularly related this to sporting activity. So here for, oh no it doesn't, so Colonial, you have kind of weightlift bells here, boxers here. Porous Knit had a whole series of adverts with men in various sporting activities. And the adverts particularly focus on the kind of the ease of movement, the type of fabric, the health-giving properties of the fabrics in this, and talks very much about sporting and athletic within the advertising. This series ran for over 10 years. And Richard Martin, the former curator of the Costume Institute in New York, he noted that natural and active positions of the figures in sports advertising, he said, that anticipated the long 20th century interest in sports as a pretext for underwear selling. Well, I think, Martin was writing this at the end of the 20th century, but this has continued as we'll see as we go through. Moving on a bit, In 1918, the Imperial Underwear Company used classical Greek sculpture to justify wrestlers within their advertisements. So they were portrayed from above with a focus on the drop seat of the garment, as you can see, here. And also, in there, they used the classical statue, the discus thrower, Discobolus, dressed in their lightweight knitted drop seat union suit to advertise this. But what's interesting as well is that they have this non-statue figure here. So it really justified the use of the male body by using classical statuary. It kind of gave a justification to the male body, and then clothing it within this particular type of underwear reinforced the kind of athletic nature of the underwear, and particularly this loose-fitting athletic style union suit. The accompanying text, you probably can't see it, begins, "Comfort in every position and posture," and uses a statement, and I quote, from one of America's largest department stores, it doesn't name, that claimed this underwear was the most comfortable and form a man can wear. In 1941, Coopers, that went on to become Jockey, used a similar marketing campaign, similar idea. They took 3 particular Greek statues, the Discobolus, the Dolophorus, and the Playing Boy, alongside photographs of what they called modern man, in the very same poses. So whereas Imperial dressed the statues in the underwear, Imperial had moved, Coopers had moved on, and they actually used a real man wearing the underwear. So it kind of moves that away from, so the change in that idea of the body being used. There are also drawings at the bottom. Here I think is interesting where the discus thrower figure is used to show the different styles of underwear being modelled. A couple of other examples of this kind of gymnast appearing in men's underwear. So 2 French advertisements here. One, again, interestingly, the discus thrower appearing again. And here a slightly different, more sort of gymnastic approach, which is replicated here in the early 2000s for campaigns by To Exist. In 1917, BVD, nobody asked me what that stands for because I can't remember. I didn't know last time and I forgot to look it up. Compared themselves to baseball as, and I quote, an American institution in this advert here, not that you can read it. But Ted Hathaway, the sports historian, noted that during the 1920s, baseball endorsement was pushed to the foreground in all areas of advertising. And I quote, "The Babe was everywhere, hawking everything from sporting goods to underwear." Between 1926 and 1930, the New York Yankees player George Herman Babe Ruth advertised Seal Pack's Babe Ruth underwear. Let me just flick back. So here, just to remind you. And in the late 1920s, he entered into the first of a series of contractual agreements with McLaughlin Manufacturing Company, coming out of Indianapolis, to produce Babe Ruth branded underwear. The underwear was available in a number of styles, including a 2-piece and a button-through sleeveless athletic union suit, which is here. You can see the button-through, with short legs, and each carried this woven label. So the label actually had Babe Ruth's signature in it, signifying this really was Babe Ruth's underwear. The underwear was also sold in boys. They're just part of the branding and marketing. So when you bought various styles of underwear, so the junior and buddy range for boys actually came with a baseball bat. And I think again it was just a way of reinforcing the advertising. The advertisement for the buddy boys style had a picture of Babe Ruth at the top with an illustration of a young man swinging a baseball bat. And I'm sorry I don't have the image in this PowerPoint. The text read, The famous home run king avoids tightness of clothing by wearing the popular athletic union suit which he himself designed. Even though according to the Babe Ruth Times, and there is such a thing, Ruth himself only wear custom-made silk undershorts, so not wearing his own underwear. The garments were sold in green box, featured a portrait of Ruth on the inside a circular section, the number 9, which was his number. So, along with the text, Babe Ruth All-American Athletic Underwear, the Champion 9. So this sportsman-designed underwear and the accompanying patching predates Beckham's bodywear by around 90 years. And like Ruth, Beckham had a specially designed label, and the box packaging features pictures of Beckham himself. Sorry, I should have put these in a different order. So this is the packaging for the original set and the label here in the underwear. So you can see it very much follows the same pattern. But what's interesting here is that Beckham's semi-clad body definitely reflects the 21st century trend to include images of buff, muscular male bodies wearing the enclosed garments. And the sporting hero Beckham is presented in order to encourage buyers and wearers to be like him, reflecting the statement from the Ruth ad about him wearing the same style. So, you know, we do actually, rather than just hearing that Babe Ruth wears his underwear, we actually see David Beckham. Whether he wears it in real life or just for the advertising campaign, who knows? We'll have to ask Victoria. Anyone know her? We'll come back to her later. And this idea of a sportsman-endorsed underwear continued throughout the 20th century and grew in popularity. Whoops, so I'm out of order, sorry. So in the 1930s, the use of named sportsmen to advertise underwear was common, particularly in the United States, and in fact, only in the United States in the 1930s. Each underwear manufacturer and brand had one or more stars from a variety of sports that endorsed the garments through the use of their name and image. So, for example, Munsingwear here have... sorry, I can't see what I can't read them on there. I'll have to read them from here. So, 1937, Scoville's advertisement for grippers featured golf's two wonder boys, as they called them, Ralph Guldahl and Sam Snead, and baseball big league stars General Bill Lee and Paul Warner, both of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And this continued. Duke Snyder here advertising Mayo Spruce. So there was and Ed Matthews here for Munsingwear. This continued after the war. 1945, Cooper's launched a series of adverts under the title There Is Only One. There are 2 examples here, comparing the unique qualities of the jockey brand to those of the sportsman, including the golfer Byron Nelson, the footballer Don Hutson, the bowling champion Ned Day in their first campaign. The following year, they produced a second set using the same There Is Only One logo, and this time including tennis player Bill Tilden, the baseball pitcher Ty Cobb, and Babe Ruth, so coming back to underwear, but for a different brand this time, as well as their own Jockey Boy, which was their own kind of iconic logo. And they were all under the title that millions agree there is only one, and it applied to both the sporting figure and the underwear. And each of the sportsmen is named and talking about why they're unique. Babe Ruth's text, which is there that you can't see, says he scored 714 home runs over 22 years and 60 in the 1927 season, and finishes, this greatest ball player of all time will be remembered as the one and only Babe. And I think Jockey were intending to be the one and only underwear. Arrow also had a series of underwear ads where they featured pictures of men in a sporting pose. And in that instance, like this for Munsingwear, it showed a man, and these are actually sportsmen here, Frank Straza and Frank Reichs, golf and tennis, with a kind of copy, a bit like the Jockey series with the statues. So you get this same pose. So the idea is that, you know, if it's good enough to play sport in, by celebrities, by well-known sportsmen, it's good enough for the general man to play it. Arrow had a series which didn't have well-known sports figures, but had men in a sporting pose, dressed in their sporting outfits, but then in the same pose in just the underwear. I'm going to jump ahead a bit now. Oh, sorry, here's the Arrow one. So showing, sporting poses in underwear, showing how underwear can allow you to move. So not necessarily named sportsmen, but definitely that idea of a sport relating to underwear. Until the 1970s, underwear advertisements featuring sportsmen presented well-known figures in their sporting uniforms rather than underwear, and the exception really was the guy in the T-shirt earlier. In 1977, this changed when Baltimore Orioles pitcher Jim Palmer, here, for those of you who don't know who he is, appeared in this advertisement campaign, "Take away their uniforms and who are they?" So for the first time, the sportsmen are actually dressed, rather than in their sporting uniforms, they're actually dressed in the brand's underwear. But I think, interestingly, they still have, these sort of elements of their own sport, just to signify that they are, in fact, sportsmen, that it's important that you know that they're sportsmen, and it tells you who they are. And sorry, this isn't a particularly good rendition. The sexual revolution of the late 1960s and 70s allowed for these icons of sporting masculinity to be pictured semi-clothed, subjecting their naked flesh to the viewer's gaze and allowing for an objectification that had previously predominantly been restricted to the female body in underwear advertising. Palmer went on to have a relationship with Jockey. He became their sole spokesman. Continued appearing in their adverts until his retirement in 1984. But what's interesting is, to justify Palmer's appearance in his underwear, some of the images featured a kind of locker room scenario. So here you can see the lockers, the kind of the shower stall here. And in this one, there's a picture of him as his kind of, as the sportsman that people recognise. So rather than just being a gratuitous image of a semi-clothed man, it kind of situates him within his sporting field. So it gives this justification as to why he should be doing that. Palmer's reputation as a clean-living, handsome, heterosexual sportsman appealed to the women who were buying underwear. And up until very recently, the statistics for women buying men's underwear for men was something like 80% of men's underwear was bought by women for men. And David Coad, the sport academic, argues that the decision to use what he calls a denuded heterosexuality, heterosexually identified athletes in underwear advertisements, quote, made perfect commercial sense for mainstream brands such as Jockey, as, and I quote, the ultimate objective was to physically attract wives out shopping for their husbands. But there was also an appeal to the heterosexual, or maybe even homosexual, male purchaser. The Jockey vice president in 1982 said, when Jim Palmer, an all-American hero, appears in our briefs, he's telling our customers it's all right to wear them. Palmer's assertive sportsman's masculinity and the direct eye contact with the viewer fixes him in what feminist philosopher Susan Bordeaux characterises as face-off ads. These, she says, are traditional, one might even say primal, in their conception of masculinity. Palmer's hairy, muscular, though not overly muscular, I think in today's sort of terms of what a body's physique should look like, it's actually relatively unmuscular by today's standards, is presented as what Bordeaux calls a powerfully armoured, emotionally impenetrable rock. So this idea that the body is almost a form of statuary, it's there, this physical, and the viewer is staring back at you. We looked at this ad a bit last time, but in direct contrast. So think about this, impenetrable rock, and then think about this. Calvin Klein's 1982 ads featuring the Brazilian-born Olympic pole vaulter, sportsman, Tom Hintnouse, photographed by Bruce Weber. With his hands resting on his thighs, his eyes closed, he leans back towards against a white, sun-drenched wall or chimney, the blue sky. It's photographed in the Greek island of Thera. with his crotch pushed forward as the focus of the image. This pose is typical of what Bordeaux's described as the languid leaner, as opposed to the rock, which has a historical precedence in classical statuary and art. Associated with the leaner, Bordeaux says, are, and I quote, the pleasures not of staring someone down, but of feeling one's body caressed by another's eyes, of being the one who receives the awaited call, who's permitted to lie, or lean, quietly, engrossed in reverie and sensation. And while this image didn't directly use classical statuary that we saw in those earlier ads where the statue was clothed, it definitely references the choice of location, the way in which the body seems to be sculpted from a kind of rich red rock against the white, the sun-baked body defining, a much more muscular body than we see on Jim Palmer. David Coad, who I mentioned earlier, compares the image of Hitnaus to that of the Kurai statue, Greek statues, that Richard Martin had made, a comparison that Richard Martin had earlier made in relation to the underwear-clad figures in the BVD adverts in the first quarter of the 20th century, which I think might be... so these figures here, Richard Martin was saying, were like the kind of Kurai statue which held up parts of classical Greek architecture. Sam Shahid, who was the creative director for Calvin Klein from 1982 to 92, noted Klein's campaigns were, and I quote, sexual but in good taste. It's sexuality that comes from being very physical, beautiful, being proud of your body. And he believed that much of that, let me go back to, so we know what we're talking about, came from Hitnaus himself, as well as the eroticism with which Weber imbued his photographs. Shahid said, it's the way he wore them, the way he felt in that underwear. Tom felt very sensual and sexual in that underwear. Look how he's posing, how he's leaned back. So bring us back to Bordeaux. Another difference, and a significant difference between this ad and the Palmer ads, is the use of text and the explicit naming of the sportsman. So here you always had somewhere Jim Palmer. There was a lot of text describing, justifying why you should buy this underwear, why Jim Palmer was supporting it. And yet we come to Calvin Klein, and all it says is Calvin Klein underwear. Some ads even got rid of this bit and just used the name in the waistband as the form of advertising. And so where was I? So the reinforced of this, the fact that there was less text reinforces the objectification of the sportsman body as a chiseled site on which the garment's placed to support and enhance the sporting male physique. So, this very much kind of emphasizes. And the fact that this was shown initially at Times Square at head height, it kind of draws the gaze very much to the crotch of, and I'll come back to this idea in relation to David Beckham in a little while. The absence of naming clearly the sportsman model in the ad became standard for the presence of sportsmen and other celebrities in underwear ads from this point on. However, it didn't mean that the presence of sportsmen wasn't celebrated in press releases and the popular press. Oh, sorry, there's I'd done a comparison and didn't know what slides I had. So there's the Kurai. So, reporting on the appointment of the Swedish footballer Freddie Ljungberg as a model for Calvin Klein, the British newspaper The Mail on Sunday noted the footballer's choice in pants, pro stretch, a new performance-inspired men's underwear that combines designer style with athletic flexibility, for which you can read skimpy, has cemented his status as a true gay straight man. The New York Times referred to Ljungberg as, and I quote, the dishy, slim-hipped metrosexual fashion plate for our times, using the term that Mark Simpson had coined and used in specific reference to David Beckham. Ljungberg first appeared in print ads for Calvin Klein. He appeared in print ads between 2003 and 2006. In the first series of 4, photographed by Stephen Klein, presented him against this simple graffitied wall with a red pro waistband, stretch underpants and a necklace, so semi-clothed. He stands In one ad, he stands with his hands loosely by his side, his head cocked to the side, staring confidently in a rock-like way at the camera. In the second one here, he raises his hands to rub his shaved head. Significant, his shaved head, because Lundberg had been known particularly for his dyed mohawk hairstyle, which had shaved off for this one. And in a third, he rests his hands on his buttocks, slightly pulling down the waistband, revealing the top of his buttocks. And like in this later ad here, where he's kind of pulling down, suggestively hinting at what's below his Calvin Klein underpants, with this tattoo sort of appearing suggestively, creeping up from inside his underpants. This wasn't real, the tattoo. It's a fake tattoo. And David Coad notes that this particularly, like the positioning on the Hintnaus ad, draws attention to Lundberg's crotch. Can't get my tongue around that Swedish name. Lundberg's crotch. Photography and art critic Melody Davis has drawn upon the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan's distinction between the corporeal state of the penis and the symbolic power of the phallus to propose the idea, and I quote, of the unseen penis transforms to the phallus, which becomes the man, who in turn becomes the true representative of the power of the product. So here, if we take that, what is being sold here? Is it the underwear, or is it the physicality of Lundberg's somewhat sweaty and muscular exposed body? So he becomes a kind of product for consumption as much as the underwear. In 2007, David Beckham, who, as Lutton had noted in the Mail on Sunday, was being usurped in his position as, I quote, football's hottest fashionista by Lundberg, appeared in a series of ads for Emporio Armani, shot in black and white by the photographers Mert Alice and Marcus Pigott. He'd already been in a number of financially lucrative sponsorship and advertisement deals for brands such as Gillette and Police Glasses, and photographed in his underwear for various men's fashion magazines, particularly Arena Homme. Classical statuary was directly referenced in relation to the commissioning and creation of this 2007 campaign. Giorgio Armani himself noted, "I design with the body of a classical athlete in my head. He brings to mind the beautiful Michelangelo statue in Florence. For me, David represents a notion of modern masculinity, strong, fit, healthy, but also considerate." And Armani's definitely referencing both David Beckham and Michelangelo's David, so playing with that idea and moving back again, referencing that idea of classical statuary. This allusion to masculinity and the way male consumers relate to images mirrored James W. Cheeseborough's reflection on the Hintnaus ad as the first vivid national portrayal of erotic masculinity, and again Sam Shahid's comments on potential responses to Hintnaus. He said, "Guys who were gay would say, 'Oh my God, it's fantastic, he's gorgeous, it's beautiful.' Straight guys would look at the ad and say, 'Oh, I want to look like that. If so, I might get a date.'" Similarly, Robin Harvey, the creative director of Leo Burnett's Atelier, who worked with Beckham on his first fragrance campaign, said of this ad, "He's the perfect package. This is lust by association. Here's a guy adored by millions of women all over the planet. Why wouldn't you want to buy the same pants as him?" And also Beckham as statuary, if you remember the first image, actually became reality here at H&M, where they created these kind of silvered statues of David Beckham in his pants. So again, this reference coming back to sportsman and statuary. In one image, Beckham's languid leaner reclining pose was, Mark Simpson noted, a mirror image for that of Lundberg in his photographs for Calvin Klein. In both advertisements, the footballers have the same hairless muscular torso, they have the same close-cropped hair, the same beard, the same emphasis on the crotch, the same inviting homoerotic gaze. The only difference really is the name, whoops, where's that gone? Here on the waistband, Calvin Klein versus Armani. This image of Beckham reclining made such an impression it's been copied and parodied in 2008 by the British comedian James Corden. and we'll come back to him in a moment, where Corden's much heavier body draws attention to Beckham's leaner, muscular physique. It was also copied by the British swimmer Mark Foster, who was photographed in colour rather than black and white. But again, it follows the same kind of gaze at the camera, but here in a slightly sort of ironic way. I'm glad you're all now familiar with James Corden, as he's being such a success here. It's interesting, this kind of notion, and how am I doing for time? Which gives me... Okay. This idea of the focus on the crotch. Up until the 1980s, there'd been a sort of flattening of the genitals in men's underwear advertising. But this 2007 campaign drew a considerable number of accusations of digital manipulation and enhancement, and with tabloid images of Beckham in white Speedos to prove the enhancement. Following a 2013 H&M television advert and a series of complaints to the British Advertising Standards Authority that the commercial was, quote, irresponsible and, again, quote, unsuitable for children to see, and that the images had been enhanced, Beckham made the following statement. He said, "I've never ever done a James Corden and padded out my pants, or shoved socks down there, though. Let's just say I've been told I don't need any help in that department." He's not called Golden Balls for nothing, is he? Do you know if he's called that? Did you know that nickname? Oh, in Britain, Beckham's known as Golden Balls. For his footballing skills, obviously. Victoria Beckham also has said, he doesn't need any help with padding. The second series of ads for Armani in 2008 reinforced Beckham's status as a sportsman, focusing much more here on this overall exercise-toned body rather than his fabric-encased crotch. It features him doing sit-ups on Los Angeles beach and returning to a much more traditional rock-like rather than languid, leaner pose. Beckham wasn't the first football player to pose for Armani. In 1996, the Liverpool football player David James appeared in a series of advertisements for Armani underwear as well as Armani jeans. He's posed in this ad, as you can see, as if at the starting line of a race. The main focus is on his muscular physique rather than, you can barely see the underwear he's wearing. It very much focuses on his shaved head, on his physicality. And this pose has been kind of replicated in a number of other ads. So here for the brand Sloggy in 2001 for their Lycra trunks. And again, in Two Exists 2007 campaign, there was a reference to this sporting pose, I don't have an image. And in 2001, the French underwear company Athena celebrated the sporting prowess of Greek Olympians in a series of advertisements that were located on the athletic track and field. And they kind of added an element of humour, and they took the idea of competition for glory. And I'm sorry I couldn't find the grab of this ad to show you. But it kind of, the idea that Greek Olympians competed nude. So the French advertising agency printed 4 advertisements for Athena, in which four naked medal-winning French athletes compete not for a crown of laurels or a gold medal, but for a set of Athena underwear. So there's one where you can see them running towards the finishing line, and so the winner is kind of running into a pair of underpants, and the gentles are kind of blurred out on the others. Armani continued using sportsmen. In spring-summer 2010, the footballer Cristiano Ronaldo was shot on location in Madrid, again by Mert Alice and Marcus Pigott. Armani declared, "Cristiano is a great-looking young man with a perfect physique of an athlete. For me, he's the essence of youth, spontaneous, exciting, a real maverick." The images of Ronaldo position his body as statue-like, highlighting and defining his musculature in a very similar way to the Beckham ads. In 2005, Ronaldo had been dubbed the new Apollo by Vogue, making reference again to Greek athletic perfection. Ronaldo was followed by Spanish tennis player Rafael Nadal in 2011, featured in 2 sets of images. And here we see both the rock and the languid leaner. Not quite the languid leaner, but, something like, here he stares defiantly, here he lays back, allowing the viewer to caress his body. And, coincidentally and interestingly, Rafael Nadal has just appeared in a new series of ads for Tommy Hilfiger, where for the majority he definitely stares in that same way. So very much the same kind of pose. In another one, he has his hands down, very like that. But I think also, interestingly, in this one, I think references back to the Lumberg ads, where he was pulling down his trousers to show off the waistband here rather than his buttocks, but hinting at the same kinds of thing. It's not just Klein and Armani who use sportsmen. Most brands feature a sporting model. So here, Sloggy used the British rugby player Ben Cohen, who incidentally and coincidentally, and there's not time to talk about everything, but has his own brand of underwear, which the proceeds go to a testicular cancer charity. The boxer Ronald Wright for To Exist. In New Zealand, the rugby player Dan Carter became the new face of Jockey. Similarly, but somewhat differently, entire sports teams have been used to advertise men's underwear. 2006, Dolce & Gabbana featured 5 members of the Italian national football team in a series of images shot by Mariano Vivanco, all in a locker room. The Dolce & Gabbana website described the footballers as, quote, modern Greek gods, who display, and I quote, sculpturesque beauty. 2008 and 9, this is the 2006 football team. Here's the 2008 rugby team. 2009 was the Italian national swimming team. In all 3 sets, not unlike the French rugby team, who famously pose naked for the Dieu de Stade calendars, these sporting gods stand and sit together in a sweaty post-match relaxation, simultaneously challenging and inviting the audience to look at their bodies and their beautifully fitting D&G underpants. Noting a trend for images of teams as sportsmen under advertising, Mark Simpson, ever the one to coin a new phrase, coined the term sporno to describe this new take on what he saw as an evoked homoeroticism, combining images of sporting prowess and gay soft porn imagery in advertising. This, what he called post-metrosexual aesthetic, in which the male body is, and I quote, not just desiring or desirable or desiring to be desired, but irresistible. And Simpson says it's a form of commodity fetishism, in which advertising and fashion are less interested in making a fetish of the potent male body than its underwear. So fetishizing not the body like earlier images, but yet the underwear here becomes particularly important. And drawing from ideas of gay pornography and the hints of and again quoting Simpson, groomed, waxed and pumped group session in the showers, the imagery is designed to appeal and sell products to male and female gay and straight consumers. Oh, whoops, sorry, no, not yet. The photographs of McClellan, by Alistair McClellan for the first David Beckham bodywear collection, used a plain grey... sorry, I can't... Let me just take a sip of water. Used a plain grey background, if you remember. Unlike the Sporno images, or even those of Beckham for Emporio Armani, which Simpson does discuss in his essays on Sporno, there's no contextual location. The focus is on Beckham, who's playing both the model and the designer, offering a double form of promotion. His 34-year-old body, while that's still of a fit and active sportsman, this is the second phase, is no longer as finely chiselled and honed as it is in the 2008 Armani campaigns. It's significantly more covered in tattoos. And cropping his body at mid-thigh in most of the images focuses the viewer's attention on his torso. Let me show... no. The ads have the large David Beckham bodywear logo across his chest and adjust to focus to highlight the groin and face, emphasising this is David Beckham in his own designed garments. The print campaign was accompanied by a commercial that was first shown during the 2012 Super Bowl. And let's see it. So now, which you may have seen. Okay, so in this, as you can see, it very much focuses on close-up shots of Beckham's tattooed torsos and arms, increasingly tattooed torsos and arms, occasional shots of his face, and the details of the waistband and label, reinforcing that it is an advert for Beckham bodywear, while the advert's a lingering fetishization and promotion of Beckham's body as much as his underwear range. The appropriateness of an internationally known football player, who at the time was playing for LA Galaxy, was questioned. CNN political analyst Roland Martin was suspended for his Twitter messages, including, and I quote, "If a dude at your Super Bowl party is hyped about David Beckham's H&M underwear ad, smack the ish out of him, hashtag Super Bowl," which was sent during the broadcast. And this led to the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation stating that the message promoted violence against gay people. Martin apologised, saying it was only a joke, which I'm not sure. Anyway, we can... the most recent, or the last set of ads for Beckham's bodywear collection, released in 2013, continued, were somewhat different. So they're photographed in colour, which had been introduced earlier. They're photographed by Josh Olins. There's a series of 6 images, and like the images of Jim Palmer, like the images of the Dolce & Gabbana, he's actually situated this time in a tiled changing room, and references this common location. Reflecting on the campaign, Beckham, who's now retired from professional football, noted, "It was great to shoot them in an old-fashioned East End changing room. It was like I'd gone right back to my roots." In 2013, Jockey, formerly Cooper, did go back to their roots, and they used Babe Ruth in their Get Real campaign, produced by the advertising agency NSG SWAT for Jockey Sport performance underwear. This designed for the everyday athlete to enhance comfort and wick away sweat. In a brief 2-second cameo near the beginning of the 30-second American television advert, a print advert for Jockey, and I don't have that again, sorry. There was a print advert for Jockey featuring Babe Ruth in a baseball uniform that was seen amongst other Babe Ruth memorabilia. So a little bit like, I couldn't find the image. Again, I had it on my computer at home, realised it wasn't in this PowerPoint. But if you imagine, it looks somewhat like... so this combination, so there's an ad, a faked up ad for Jockey, with this kind of Babe Ruth memorabilia all around. So situating Babe Ruth definitely as the kind of sporting hero. And it's juxtaposed against descriptions of Jockey's underwear heritage. The laboratory tests that were carried out on underwear. Let me just get back to where oops, no, we've seen that. Laboratory tests carried out on underwear and scenes of real men playing sport. Jockey's Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer, Dustin Cohn, explained Babe Ruth's appeal and why he featured in the ad. And there were various print ads. I think this is an interesting print ad where, a bit like the earlier ads where you had the sportsman in his sporting uniform playing the sport, then juxtaposed against a cut scene here of somebody wearing this new everyday sport performance underwear. So Dustin Cohn explained, showcasing everyday people in our advertisements goes back to Babe Ruth. He also emphasised that he played right into the real athlete positioning. It wasn't just a celebrity professional athlete, it was a guy who was at the top of his game, but was a real guy. And I think that's kind of interesting, that this idea, there was a trend around this time as well for real men's bodies in advertising. There's a New York Times a New York Times article, less ab, more flab. And so this kind of idea of dad bodies. Do you have that expression here? So this kind of idea of moving away from the kind of hyper masculine toned sportsman to a kind of much more real, slightly less toned body. It's significant that Jockey should utilise their former sporting endorser in their 2013 campaign. Ruth had played a significant role in the development of branded underwear, launching his own name brand that predated Beckham's much-discussed venture into design and manufacturing, moving away from solely acting as a model for somebody else's name designer brand. That Ruth appears as an historic element of Jockey's underwear legacy through the inclusion of the historic print advert in which he's wearing his sporting uniform reflects Ted Hathaway's comments that the Babes ads were, to use that much abused term, always tasteful, emphasising his great talent and stature. Armani used Beckham, like Ruth, his talent as a football player, his stature as a celebrity commodity, and his appeal to both male and female consumers. But also, like his predecessors from the latter part of the 20th century, he's portrayed in what might be considered a less tasteful manner than Ruth, revealing his body as much as the garments that he's producing. So the presence of the near-naked sporting male body is now common throughout all forms of contemporary visual culture, and with advertising certainly posed a question about what commodity is being sold. Is it the product? Is it a fantasy of idealised sporting male flesh? Edisol Dotson noted, masculinity or manliness is a cultural creation, and that in contemporary society, quote Dotson again, men are meat, their naked bodies hoisted up on larger-than-life billboards and frozen in print advertisements. And the effect of appropriation of athletic, muscular, youthful male body by mainstream culture has been to make the idealised male body not only an object to be imitated by men, but also, regardless of their sexual orientation or preference, to be desired by them, I'd argue. David Coad, to come back to him again, has noted, men's underwear publicity featuring athletes as models reveals how metrosexuality has penetrated to the most intimate apparel worn by males. Perhaps it's the mere fact that these models were sporting heroes that validated a heterosexual male gaze. It was one of admiration and desire to be like his hero that made the consumption of these images acceptable. Just to finish off on a slightly lighter note, and a not quite sportsman advertising underwear, but I don't know if you'll be familiar with this image. This is an image from 2012 football match between Denmark and Portugal. And this is the striker, the Danish striker Niklaus Bentner, who was fined £80,000 by UEFA, the European Football Association, for a blatant ambush marketing here for Paddy Power. Paddy Power's, do you have Paddy Power here? It's a bookmakers, so gambling company. So, but I think what's interesting is it again, it kind of, it brings back and questions the whole relationship, I would argue, between sportsman, underwear and advertising. Thank you. Time, a few questions? I'm just stunned into silence by all that flesh. Colour? Yeah.
I was raised with white, maybe small checks, maybe some small soft plaids in the winter, boxers back and forth. Calvin Klein, of course, got a huge splash. But I personally, I have trouble with the masculine aspect of color, and it seems to be getting with the younger generation even more and more color. So I'm just curious, on a personal note, I would say 99% of us are the only ones that are going to see it, and it's so interesting that they're bringing color and stripes, angles, and whatever in the underwear. What is that phenomenon? Is it just boredom, or pop culture? Is it just more? Or is it the animations, constant graphics that we're exposed to? I'm just curious about the psyche for some men or young men going from either white or very plain, and then that crossover to these mad patterns and color, and a lot of times a sense of humor.
I think it's a fashion search for something different. It's fashion's cycle of movement around. So. Last week I was talking about, this kind of move. On one hand, there was a move that historically been moves towards a kind of more lingerie style underwear for men. So as reaction to this kind of tighty-whitey, or the simple choice between briefs or boxers, white, or, as you say, And I think it's very much fashion's kind of desire for something different. And I think increasingly men are consumers of fashion, consumers of clothing in the way that they haven't been historically. Certainly, I know in London last year, the sales of men's clothing outstripped women's. So men's clothing outsold women's in terms of the amount of money sold, not in terms of the amount of objects bought, but the amount of money. And I think so, there is this desire. I mean, I think people do want, often young men don't want to dress like their dads. I think fashion tells us that. I think if you look at changes in men's fashion, if you look at certainly the 1960s and that kind of peacock revolution, it was very much a reaction against a kind of uniformity. And I think, to simplify very grossly, fashion responds. So if fashions are simple and pared back, then the next phase will be something more outrageous. I mean, there is something interesting called the underwear index, where finance actually looks at. It's a bit like the kind of the hemline index. So the kind of the amount of underwear that is sold, and men's underwear particularly as well, the amount of underwear sold and bought reflects the kind of economic status. So in times of economic downturn, underwear sales rise. Yeah, because I think people want to buy, not necessarily what they deem to be luxury items, whether we call them luxury or not, whether it's a luxury item. So rather than have to buy and spend a lot of money on a complete new outfit, you can make yourself feel better. I'm not really answering your question. I know I'm wandering off. So I think sales do change, and I think it's very much about they reflect. I think underwear does reflect fashions in men's clothing. So 3 or 4 years ago, there was definitely a phase for patterned underwear, when previously there'd only be simple simple colours. Calvin Klein, when he first launched in black, white, grey, and khaki. But then there have been waves where they've introduced colour. Jockey introduced colour in about 2010. But it was very much a kind of retro look. They were very much kind of contrast piping on colour. So very much like 70s. So I think it's about cycles of fashion. You'd have to ask young men about why they might buy. Did that kind of give you some answer to that question? Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, in that case, thank you very much. There is a book. If you want to read more, do buy the book. I don't get royalties, so, help support your local bookstore.